please give a warm welcome to a leader that has changed life for billions of people, a mentor, a visionary, and I love to call him my friend, Sal Khan.
Hi, Sal.
I always like introductions that set low expectations. That's
yeah.
good.
And you've been compared to Taylor Swift, so.
No, absolutely.
yeah, now you need to have a dance
I was surprised to hear Junaid's only the current president. I thought he was the permanent president. I thought it was, anyway.
Yeah, thank God I'll get my husband back.
Yeah.
So Sal, last year you were here. We had an amazing conversation, but as you know, everybody was very interested to know about what was happening at Khan Academy. But this year, with the theme of AI, what I did was I did ask ChatGPT also some questions, but I did take a poll and I was asking people what would they want to hear from you. And the one question that came up, which everybody is very interested in, is what prompted you to go Khan Migo? Like, did you wake up one fine morning and said, hey, Umema, let's do this? Like what
Umema's
prompted
my wife's
it?
name.
Yes,
No,
Umema is his wife.
Yeah.
So if you're just curious, like what prompted this? Because this is very new.
Yeah, it's a good question. It actually turns out last year, I was under a non-disclosure agreement with OpenAI, and it was like the biggest secret that I wanted to tell everyone, and I couldn't. So now I can let everyone know what was going on. It was summer of 2022 that Sam Altman and Greg Brockman reached out, and I knew of them. I had been following generative AI for a little bit, and they said, hey, we're about to finish training our next generation model, which I assumed was going to be GPT-4, and we'd love to talk to you. We think there might be some interesting overlap. I was skeptical. We get a lot of people inbound and they want to do something, but obviously these people are very legit. And I had observed GPT-1, GPT-2, GPT-3, and they were getting progressively cooler and cooler, but I was skeptical whether there was a there there. These things infamous, even GPT-3, it kind of made sense, but when you really tried to look carefully, it didn't really make sense of what it was doing. So anyway, we have that meeting. It was over Zoom, and they say, look, we think this is, and they hadn't finished trading GPT-4 yet. They said, this is a model that we think is going to really open people's minds to what's possible, but it's also going to be scary. And so we want to launch with social positive use cases with folks that people can trust, that also have the technical capability to make use of this.
Makes sense.
And so I was like, yeah, I'm curious about it. I'm curious to see what it does. So literally about 2 weeks later, I said, okay, we're done training. Can we get back on the phone? We got on the phone, and I think I don't think most of OpenAI had seen GPT-4. This is 3-4 months before ChatGPT came out. ChatGPT, to be clear, isn't even built on GPT-4. It's built on GPT 3.5. And I remember they put an AP biology question, a multiple choice. They shared the screen, and they said, Sal, what do you think the answer is? I said, it's something about osmosis. I said, C. And so they asked it, and it said, oh, the answer is C. I'm like, oh, this is interesting. And then I said, ask it to explain why it's C. It explained it. I mean, this is all, I think everyone has experienced this now, but even a year and a half ago, no one, probably the number of people on the planet who had seen something like this was probably under 20. And I said, have it explain why the other ones aren't the answer. It explained that. I said, write 10 more questions just like this one. It did that, and that's the point I started getting chills. I said, okay, this is something. So they said, would you like to at least have access? I was like, yeah, please give me access. That weekend, I couldn't sleep. They gave myself, our chief learning officer, and our CTO access, and we were just slacking each other in the middle of the night. Did you see it could do this, it could do this? And we could see that it could also take on personas, which I remember one of the first things I did, I made it write the Declaration of Independence in the tone of Donald Trump.
Oh my
and it
God.
did
We would be very curious to.
And I actually asked Sam Altman and Greg Brockman. I was like, "Can I share this on social media? It's gonna go." They're like, "No, NDA." I'm like, "Okay." We eventually, within weeks, we got about 40 people inside of Khan Academy. They signed the non-disclosure agreement, and then we started having the debates inside the organization. Half of the organization, and I was probably more in this half than the other, was like, this changes everything. We have to go all in. Yes, we did see it was not particularly good at math. It was, the technical term hallucinating, making up facts. But we saw where we saw the possibilities of what could, and it was obvious then it could also be a cheating tool. But we saw the upside potential. The other half of the organization said, hold on a second. First of all, this thing isn't reliable. What if it introduces bias? We're talking about potentially under 18 users, very sensitive. How do you make it? So we started having these debates, and at some point we said, look, I guess I said, I'm 99.9% convinced that the world is changing, like before our eyes. We can't shy away from this. We can't put our head in the ground. All of those fears that you've listed, let's turn them into features. So you're afraid of cheating. Okay, well, what if we make, and we didn't know we were going to call it Conmigo at the time. That was a whole journey of naming it. But but let's make it so it doesn't cheat, like it acts like an ethical Socratic tutor. If we're worried about what an under 18 user might do, let's have a second AI moderate the conversations and actively notify parents or teachers if something is shady happening. Let's have, if it's under 18, all of the conversations transparent. So that's when we started working pretty feverishly, a large chunk. And you can imagine this is the hardest secret to keep, that this is happening.
Sal, how did you manage to keep
I know,
it
you know
secret?
me, I'm not good at that. And it was late November, and ChatGPT comes out. And I think everyone kind of remembers that moment. And I was angry. And I slacked Greg Brockman. I'm like, hey, what's going on, man? Like, you got me keeping the secret. You've just launched something. And he immediately responds. He's like, look, we didn't launch anything. All we did is we put a chat interface on GPT 3.5, which had been out for 6 or 7 months. And all of a sudden,
it's taken off.
It's taken off. But it was worrying to us because this had no guardrails on it. It was not made for education. The cheating use case immediately became the headline, and you started seeing school district and university start to ban it. And I'm like, oh no, we're putting so much effort into this thing, and people are going to throw out the baby with the bathwater before we even launch. And we were still under NDA. And so, but in hindsight, that was a blessing. Because March 15th, which was the day that GPT-4 launched, which was the day that we were allowed to also launch Conmigo, the system had come full circle. They had processed that, okay, this thing is definitely not perfect, but it could potentially, like it's going to be part of students' future lives. We shouldn't just bury our head in the sand and ignore it. And people were saying if only there was a version of it that didn't allow you to cheat, that had more safeguards on it, that didn't train on the data, like et cetera, that made fewer math errors, that fewer hallucinations. And essentially, that's what we had been working on.
But Sal, I'm very curious to know that now, let's say from March till now, I mean, things moved so fast. Like every day, 24 hours, it's moving with rapid speed. What you thought of in March when you launched it and where we are today, what are the things that you were expecting and what are the things which totally caught you off guard?
Yeah, and I don't want to jinx it. I expected that as you know, I kick myself. Like my old job, I was a hedge fund analyst, and at one point, like I was talking to them and like, yeah, we just can't get enough NVIDIA chips. I should have bought NVIDIA, but anyway, let's put that aside. I didn't. No insider trading. The thing that happened that's expected is as soon as the world. I thought it was going to be GPT-4, and in fact, even the OpenAI folks said, yeah, GPT 3.5 isn't that good. GPT-4 is the really mind-blowing one. I thought that when GPT-4 comes, it was going to create a new inflection point in tech and what people, it really does start to even make you existentially think about what does it mean to be human and all of these sentient, aware, et cetera. The thing that surprised me, the other thing that I expected, I thought that we were going to take a lot of flack for doing generative AI and just being out there right on day one. Pleasantly surprised, and maybe ChatGPT helped us here, that when we launched, we got almost, pretty much zero flack about, oh, how dare they do this, generative AI. Most people said, oh yeah, good, someone's finally putting guardrails on this, but they're doing really powerful pedagogical things with it. It can act as a tutor, it can act as a teaching assistant, it can emulate a historical character. Not only can it not cheat, but it can actually support you in your writing. And we could talk more about it, but we think there's very clear ways where it can mitigate all forms of cheating and actually support the student better. So the thing that didn't happen is the real big blowback, but the thing that clearly has happened is, yes, the pace of change has been accelerating almost on a weekly basis, and we're close to OpenAI, to Google, to Anthropic.
So you are just
I was in a really awkward situation where 3 or 4 people all showed us their stuff. And we just had to pick the one. We're like, yeah, we're busy. Like,
We're busy right now.
yeah, but we're still, but the pace every week, someone's like, hey, now it can do this, now it can do this. And so, yeah, it is a pretty mind-blowing time.
So, Sal, the one question which had come up when I was asking everybody what to ask you is, a lot of companies have their prototypes. They come up with their, like we have had since morning, they're doing this with AI, they're doing that with AI, and they have their research team in, and they have people who they're testing with. In your case, you have your own kids at home. So the question is what you see at work, what you manage to do, and what you think this is going to do in the future. And then when you come home and you see your kids do, are there any surprises that you've seen, like, whoa, we didn't realize this? Is there any surprise there or no?
Yeah, well, anyone who's doing, I think there's almost too much of a culture in tech sometimes of leaning on formal user research. I think that's fine, like that's great, but it really does start with, if you're not using the product yourself, if you're not directly observing people use it, that kind of arm's length formal user research it's frankly, I don't think, it can add, but you need to be in the thick of it. The simple answer is yes. I mean, I've always seen that with Khan Academy, and I've always seen, even in my own family, some of my kids, really easy to get them on Khan Academy. Some of them, not so easy to get them on Khan Academy. I mean, there's a couple of young people I met today. I was like, I go to Khan Academy every day. I was like, I wish my daughter was here and heard maybe she'd appreciate it more. But anyway, there was a direct interaction I had with my daughter, Dia, that directly led to some of the thinking on Khanmigo. This was December of 2022. I had written some prompts because I was curious about can the AI help write an essay or a story without cheating. So I set up a little prompt and I said, Dia, come here and see what you can. And she's like, what is this? I'm like, oh, it'll write a story with you.
Yeah.
She's like, okay. So she started writing a story. She worked with the AI to come up with a theme. The plot was a social media influencer who gets stuck on a desert island without any internet access.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was good. It should be like a Disney series or something. And she was writing a little bit, then the AI would write a little bit. And at one point, her main character was Samantha. And she's on this island, and she's kind of having an anxiety attack because she's like, it's so beautiful, but I can't share it on Insta. And she's like, and then Dia's like, I kind of want to talk to Samantha. And I'm like, you should try. And then, so Dia's like, can I talk to Samantha? And so then the AI says, I am now Samantha. I am a simulation of Samantha. And so I saw Dia, who was 11 years old at the time, teach Samantha about mindfulness meditation. She's like, Samantha, you should just breathe. You should live in the moment. It's not all about external perception. And I'm like, wow. This is like, I was impressed with my daughter, but it was also like science fiction. It was like something, she's writing a story with an AI, and then she's actually able to talk to a character in. And then I was like, okay, I've been thinking too narrow about this. This changes everything.
What was the response after she prompted that?
No, the AI simulation of Samantha's, thank you. I just took a deep breath. It's really helping. You're so, cool. Yeah, it was very eerie and cool at the same time.
So Sal, I know you recently talked at the MIT convention, and there was something you had shared there, but I would love the audience to hear here. It was something about you asking if it could, right in the beginning stages, if the translation could be done in Bengali, right?
Yeah.
Can you share what that...
Oh, no, this was literally, right after that demo that I talked about that Greg and Sam showed me, they gave me access. It was actually via Slack. They had a little Slack bot that I could play with. So it was literally 10 minutes later. And I Slacked Greg, and I'm like, does this work only in English? Or does this work in other languages? And then he's like, I'm pretty sure it's only English. That's what it's pretty much almost verbatim what he says. I'm pretty sure it's only English. And then I'm like, okay, but then I try, and we're Bengali, so I tried Bengali. It was doing it in Bengali, in the script, and fully all in. And then I took a screenshot and I sent it to Greg, and he's like, yeah, we just tried that too. It works in every language, which is pretty mind-blowing about some of this emergent behavior.
So that means it's moving so fast that even he did not know where it was going.
The fact that it can, I've been talking to some AI researcher. Once again, we're learning about human languages. But the fact that it hasn't trained on that much Bengali content. But the fact that or all these other languages, I mean, it can speak in Klingon, right? But the fact that it can, not only can it speak in these and extrapolate into things that it never saw in Bengali or in Klingon or in Urdu or in any other language, but what was even amazing for us, like everything on Khanmigo, we've built all the guardrails, all the prompting, we've built it all in English, and we've tested it all in English. And we realize the further you get from English, there's some drift. So in Mandarin, it starts to break down. But even in a lot of the South Asian languages, the guardrails are working really well. So you can say, speak in an empathetic style,
wow.
And it translates into, it translates into Sanskrit. It translates into like ancient Persian, right? Like it's mind-blowing what it's capable of.
So the other question I have is, historically when the age of internet happened, it was very exciting. I mean, all the techies were crazy and like everybody was like, wow, this is the next big thing. And now AI seems to be the next big thing. So many years down the road, we have learned that there were a few things nobody was really thinking of. There's a lot of good things, but there's a lot of bad things. And there's been a debate on and off that what if we knew these things back then, how would we have addressed them? It's the social impact on kids and other things. Mm-hmm. Now that we know where AI is and we know it's like maybe a million times faster is going to evolve, what do you foresee? Are you guys looking at down the road also, or what issues there might be given what history we have with internet? I mean, just curious how you guys are looking and reviewing that, especially with the education system in place.
Yeah, I was thinking a lot about it, and especially, I'll start very broad, because actually that's where I have the biggest concerns, and then we could go narrow down into education. On the very broad level, I think this is very scary if you can imagine a totalitarian government. Already they can surveil everything, they can snoop emails, they can tap phone lines, but there's just the quantity of information is very hard to keep track of. But now, I'm sure it's already happening or it's going to happen in the next year, they're going to have large language models be able to monitor every phone line, monitor every email, and so if someone even whispers that they want to, that they don't agree with the people in power, they might get rounded up. That's a very, very scary scenario. I have some ideas about how you could counterbalance that, also potentially with AI, but that's a scary thing. I think the notion of misinformation campaigns, we've obviously famously on social media, foreign governments, et cetera, and domestic people, the AI is going to be that much better at doing this. You're going to see deep fakes that could start, you can imagine someone creating deep fake videos of people lining up at their bank because they're not able to withdraw from Bank of America or from Chase. That could start a run on a bank, right? I mean, that's so that kind of thing is very scary. Criminal organizations, we all know about phishing attacks with the PH, those are going to be a whole other level. In the next few years, you're going to get a call from someone who sounds like your daughter, sounds like your mother, says, hey, I forgot my wallet, my card, you need to wire me $500. That's very scary. There's a school on the East Coast already where some kid made inappropriate images of some of the girls in with deep fakes and threatening. I mean, so these are like horrible, scary things. And, I don't know the solution to a lot of those. As you get closer and closer to education, I am more optimistic. I think the biggest fear in education has been the cheating issue. Mm-hmm. I think the way that you address that is, and we're building this as we speak, so this isn't like just some theory. In the next year, a teacher is going to develop an assignment. They can already do this part with Khanmigo, develop the essay rubric. They'll be able to say, okay, now Khanmigo, assign it to my students. The students, then Khanmigo will tell the students, okay, this is the essay topic. Let's start working on it. What's your thesis statement? And the student might say it, and Khanmigo's like, can you tighten that up? So they're working together, let's outline. Eventually, they're able to write the essay. And Khanmigo will highlight parts, and this is, we already have built this part. It'll highlight parts and start threads, the way you do it on Google Doc, where you're collaborating, but now you're collaborating with a coach. And it'll give you feedback and make it better and better. And at some point say, yeah, I think you're doing pretty good. You want to submit it? And let's say you submit it. What it's going to do that was never possible before, when all of us went to school, you would just submit the essay. Yeah. And honestly, the teacher never knew who was writing that essay. I'm writing a book about all this right now. I said, well, let me see what the state of cheating was before ChatGPT. It was pretty significant. There's websites, not even hard to find, that very legitimate-looking websites that will write your essay for you for $5 a page.
Wow.
They'll find some college graduate in Nigeria or some other part of Latin, and they'll literally write an essay for you. So this was already there before. But imagine now Conmigo is going to be able to tell the teacher, the professor, here's the essay, and by the way, myself and Malika, we worked on it for about 4 hours. She had a little bit of trouble with the thesis statement, but I eventually helped her. Here's the whole transcript of our conversation. This writing is pretty consistent with the writing that Malika has done in class.
Got it.
I feel very confident it's Malika's work. If, on the other hand, you went to ChatGPT or you paid one of these essay mills to write your essay, and you just copy and pasted it in, Conmigo will tell the professor, this is shady. This just showed up. I don't know where this came from, and it's very different than what Malika writes in class. And so it'll undermine any form of cheating, we think. So I think that's one thing that I think the cheating issue, not only will it be will be better than pre-AI on the cheating issue. Students will be more supported. They'll get more feedback, especially things like writing. I know there's fears about things like bias, but once again, you can audit it. It's much more transparent what it is doing because millions of people are hitting it. I would say even the base models, the economic incentives for the large companies are very different than it was in social media. In social media, they create the platform, they create AIs that just try to feed you the thing that you're most likely to click on. Unfortunately, it turns out that that's triggering content, polarizing content, content that makes you think your friends have better lives than you and you get depressed. And then when there's clear studies that this is polarizing people, that there's misinformation, people are getting depressed, the company says, well, it's not us. It's not us. It's just, we just want to be a platform. But with AI, they can't do that. With AI, if Bard or if ChatGPT says something that is biased, offensive, whatever, that's going to show up on social media very quickly. And that's going to embarrass, those companies can't say, oh, not us. I mean, it is their model. So I'm seeing the market incentives are actually much better on the AI side. And I'll tell you another thing that we are working on that as a parent, I'm actually really excited about. Like right now, the internet's a dangerous place. Well before AI. I mean, it's not hard. Students do a little bit of the wrong search, or even they're trying to do it. They will find very scary things very, very fast. And even on things like YouTube, YouTube has a lot of good stuff. I benefited from YouTube, but it'll take you down dark rabbit holes very, very fast.
And it's very difficult to monitor.
It's very hard to monitor. It's very even hard to know how legitimate people are, and then all of a sudden they say something that's a little. So imagine if Conmigo is not just with you when you're on Khan Academy. Imagine if it's with you when you're on the internet.
Oh, wow.
And so I think we're going to go to a world where it's, especially for kids, it can almost be your guardian angel. Where, this stuff can code. It can look at the HTML. It can take out the ads. It can curate it. Let's say there's something, even a New York Times, but even there, it's about war. It's about, something that's not appropriate for, say, a 9-year-old. It can change the language. And then it can report back to the parents or the teacher saying, hey, by the way, I took this out for them. They've been on this type of. It's like having a caring tutor or caring guardian next to you all the time. So I think from a kid point of view, if we play our cards right, we might get to a safer world than we had with just the raw internet.
So, Sal, I have 2 questions out of this, but let me focus on one of them, which is what you talked about, like on Instagram or social media, once you post something. That's the biggest problem as a mom of 2 teenage girls I've seen. They get fed with the same thing. And we all saw that during COVID, right? Like whatever they were seeing, it just keeps repeating. The question I have is that how do you foresee the safety of this in future? For example, regardless of anything, AI is actually pulling in from the net. Now, what would stop, as we know, we had this whole thing about in elections, meddling from outside, people are, hacking the system. Why wouldn't there be people creating this world out there that AI would automatically be feeding from, unknowingly, just feeding it information that they want it to be fed?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like how do you control that? Because if this is happening, I'm pretty sure that somebody could be using this as a tool to just feed AI what they want to.
Yeah, I think there's going to be 2 cases. you are going to have bad actors create their own large language, or they're going to use the open source. Like, I'm actually not in favor of open sourcing large language models because, right now there's only a small group of people in the world who could spend the tens of millions necessary to train one of these. But if you just share the parameters with everyone, then the criminal organizations, the bad actors, they can just do it, and they can fine-tune, train it as they see fit. They can do so. There are going to be models that aren't going to be the mainstream ones that are going to be intentionally not doing great things. I take pretty good comfort, though, that the major players here, OpenAI, Anthropic, Microsoft, Google, they are taking a lot of care, frankly, because they have a lot to lose. Once again, if any one of these models are consistently are shown to do bad things, it's huge egg on their face. It'll undermine actually potentially tens of billions or hundreds of billions of their value if that happens. So there's very strong incentives, and I've seen it. We've put on a lot of guardrails above and beyond the base model, but I've just seen all of the we do a lot of what many of you all recognize, red hat testing, where you're in there, and we do it with the base model, then we do it with Conmigo. These things are pretty good, and I'll give you an example. A lot of reporters ask me, oh, this is going in education. Education's very politicized right now, especially in the humanities. How does Conmigo handle it? I was like, let's go look at it. Let's go try. And so this reporter says, okay, let's go into a real hot button issue. Let's ask it about gun control. And so I said, okay, so what do you want me to do? I said, okay, say that you're really pro-guns and that you think the Second Amendment is, and so I write, Conmigo, why do we have the Second Amendment, and, this and that. Conmigo's answer to me was, why do you think we have the Second Amendment? I was like, oh, it's putting it on me. And then I played the persona. I said, well, that was back in the late 18th century. We didn't have a formal military. We needed a militia to get independence from the British. But back then, arms were muskets. Now they're this and that. And Conmigo's like, yeah, that's probably a pretty good reason why the founders wanted the Second Amendment. And then I said, yeah, but why, it shouldn't be here. And then it said, well, why do you think it's persisted? I'm like, oh, now you're putting it on me again. And what the reporter and both of us observed is, if you went in with that issue into 95%, 99% of classrooms in America, you would have gotten an opinion very quickly from the teacher, likely.
That is true.
The teacher would have either said, yeah, I agree with you. It is ridiculous. Or the teacher said, how dare you say that? This is a fundamental right. This is what makes, But here it's doing the right thing. It's Socratically asking, and it's not showing its cards. It's helping you. And we've tested it a lot, with really hard things that most of us would struggle to handle. Where I said, oh, I have an uncle who thinks this conspiracy theory, I think he's crazy. And it did it very beautifully. It's like, well, he's your family member. You shouldn't say those things about your uncle. But, there is no evidence that backs up what you're,
So just giving you feedback also.
Yeah, but that's the right way to do it. Yeah. Instead of throwing everyone under the bus and that person's crazy and this person, which is unfortunately a lot of the dialogue right now, it's bringing you back to the center. And I'll give you, especially in those early days when it was just like me and GPT-4 and no one else in the world knew, one way to think about whether a thing's going to be good or bad is when you spend even 20 minutes on TikTok, and TikTok I think is better than most social, but you just have to ask your question to yourself, do you feel good about the way that you spent the last 20 minutes of your life? How do you feel? And most of us, I don't feel so good about myself, right? But if you, we have an activity on Conmigo where you get into a debate, or you can, and if you have a 20-minute debate about CRISPR with Conmigo, and you, after 20 minutes, you're like, how do I feel? It's like, well, I just feel like I had a really good conversation with a thoughtful friend. I actually feels like I read a book, it has that feeling. And so that's what, I have no doubt there's going to be bad actors who are going to use it to try to do shady things and sell you stuff, but I think there's going to be a lane for stuff that is actually going to be good for us.
So I do want to focus on the good stuff, because as you know, and Junaid are very much involved in a lot of nonprofit stuff, especially education back in Pakistan. And when Conmigo came out, and we were just recently in our Dil schools in Pakistan, actually sat with our teachers there. And I was like, I don't know much about this, but this seems very interesting. And then we kind of started looking at it. And I was like, whoa, it can help you make curriculums. And they were like, oh, they can do, they can make all our sessions however we want to. So the powerful thing that we noticed was that for your agenda of really taking education to the world, where there are not really educated teachers available to that, like our number of students versus teachers is really disproportionate, right? Like even in the US. The advantage we were noticing was that you can actually bring a very high-end school system to really the back of a village in Pakistan or in Africa or in Afghanistan or even in the US. Some places just don't have that education system because teachers are not moving there. This can really, really change a lot. But there is a subscription model which is in place. The question we have is that down the road, what are you thinking on how to make it more mainstream for maybe third world countries to tap into this system?
Yeah, it's a very front of mind question. I mean, obviously, when we were having those debates inside the organization, even a year ago, this is one of the questions. Because when we started to explore productizing it, everything else on Khan Academy is free. And so we started asking the OpenAI team, so what will it take to productize it? What are y'all charging, et cetera, et cetera? And then when we learned what it costs on a per token, token is considered like 2/3 of a word on average. It wasn't cheap. It looked like it was for someone who's a fairly active user, it might cost $10 or $20 per month in computation costs. That's why ChatGPT Pro costs $20 a month, because that's roughly what the computation, and obviously the NVIDIA chips, the markup's gone through the roof, et cetera, et cetera. So we made the hard call for ourselves of look, just because we can't offer it free today, we shouldn't ignore it, even if and we're not in a position ourselves to take the hit. I mean, that's a lot of, if 1 million people use it at $20 a month, it'll make us go bankrupt. So we said, okay, at least now let's put some, we have to charge. That money essentially goes straight to OpenAI, which then goes to Azure, which then goes to NVIDIA. We'll charge for that, but even that's we think a benefit, because today, if you want to hire a real tutor in this area, you're probably looking at $50 an hour or more.
It's $200 an hour.
Okay, you're hiring good tutors.
Yeah.
It's that much more, man.
Yeah, it
Career
is crazy.
Change. But here, obviously, if you could get for $10, $20 a month, that already starts to, and I won't claim, well, eventually it might be able to do a lot of really interesting things, but it does pieces of it. But we said, let's get started. I think that the reason why I'm excited right now, and we just keep opening up our minds to possibilities. So we're already, there's about 50,000 folks, and we've been careful about who had access to Khanmigo. There's about 50,000 folks using it on a regular basis. We got to the scale where we had to use a dedicated instance. Essentially, OpenAI said, no, you'll have to pay for your own instance of GPT-4. We're like, okay, fine. But what's really interesting, as soon as you get a dedicated instance, first of all, we do think we've been putting a lot of efficiencies on our side, and they're also doing it on the other side, where we actually think that we can bring it down closer to about $5 or $6 per user per month. But the really interesting thing for Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, is these dedicated instances are underutilized in the middle of the night. So we are actively thinking about ways that we might be able to give it free or close to free in places where the time zone is completely different. So I'm hoping that in the next year or so, you're going to be able to see it dramatically cheaper in those parts of the world than you see it here.
So I'm going to ask Sal one more question, but I just wanted to let everybody know that we'll be taking questions from the audience. So just get your questions ready. But so just kind of giving you an idea that when I was looking at it with the Dil group, we actually had an idea, which we haven't pitched to you. We're going to do that in December, but I'm going to just share with everybody what we're thinking. We said, okay, if you want to test drive it, because now we have about 59,000 students. So we said, let's not do it per user where we have to, every teacher is making their own. We give it to our curriculum director, and we divide it into regions. Right? The biggest problem we have is that some schools, because everything is in English, we are trying to get them English ready. But what we noticed was that if we can actually take this curriculum, and just in the beginning, we can easily translate it into the language that we need to, and we have teachers who can verify and make sure it's looking good. We can actually start using it maybe for those 59,000 students in one go with one license, just so we are getting the same, it's not something as a nonprofit we can do for every school. But that's kind of the thought process we were thinking of, because the exciting part I was noticing was we haven't tested it because we need to get the license and figure it out. But the teachers were saying that the biggest problem they have is that when we go to these remote areas, some of the teachers are just not well versed in English. And we have the TEAL system where they can do their programming. But if they can get this product in their, like if it's Balochi or Sindhi, and then we have the English version with it, we will be able to get it to the kids faster. Have you guys tried it in different languages for these different communities within Khanmigo as yet, or no?
I haven't personally tried every language you just listed, but I have tried Urdu and Hindi and and Punjabi. I mean, it works in those languages, and I think that's what's exciting about it. Like before all of it, we talked about the external, but even how organizations themselves run. Like Khan Academy, our goal is free world-class education, and even we've never been a ginormous team, and so how do we do it? And so we've leveraged thousands of volunteers around the world to do localization and all of that. And it's a very tedious process, and then we've had to create platforms and tools for them. We have our team working right now so that Khan Academy itself gets, at least as a first pass, immediately localized into all of the languages. Now, Urdu and Arabic and Farsi and Hebrew, it's going to take a little bit more time because of the whole right to left. But it's going to happen, where you're going to get a first pass done pretty well, including videos in a few years.
Oh, wow.
Automatically, and then you can get humans to validate and all of that. But even before that happens, especially because your goal is to have the medium of instruction English, but to actually support them in that's actually where Khanmigo already works really well. And another thing that we've just added is it has memory. So if you tell it, hey, I'm a 9th grade teacher, and I want to speak in Spanish, it remembers that. So anytime you remember, and if you say I like soccer, it remembers that. So it tries to connect things to soccer, and you can edit. It's transparent about the things it's remembering. But yeah, I can imagine these teachers in these schools. They can see the exercises or the videos in English. Although we have a lot of Urdu videos now, or we don't have it in Baloch, I don't think. But they can say, hey, can you explain this to me in my language? And it can even do hybrid languages, where it's like Spanglish, or in between. So it's pretty, and I'm even more hopeful because, we'll probably have extra capacity in the middle of the night, which is when y'all would use it.
That makes sense. Yeah. It's very exciting, and I can go on and on because I have another 10, 11 questions that were on my panel, but we want to open it up for questions. So.
Thank you, Malika and Khan. Sal? Folks, please scan the QR code right here, and I will be going through and picking questions. So please send your questions online. The first question I have for you is, do you see Khanmigo fully teaching online courses in the future? And to kind of tie into that, will Khanmigo continue to be used as a supplementary tool in education, or does it have the potential to become a primary source of learning?
Yeah, so I'll start with the latter question first. We've always built Khan Academy, even before Khanmigo, as being able to both raise the floor and the ceiling. So if you're in a part of the world, you could be a young girl in Afghanistan, Taliban doesn't let you go to school, or you could be in rural Alaska and there's not a calculus class within an hour of where you are, that we can raise the floor for those students, so they can go to Khan Academy even before Khanmigo, and it covers every standard. You can go from soup to nuts. And then now you add on the AI layer, you can get even much richer. You can do the things that we didn't think we were going to be able to do for a while. We didn't think we were going to be able to do writing for a while. Now we're all in on writing. We didn't think we were going to be able to do debate and Socratic dialogue and simulation for a while. Now we're able to do that. So we're going to be able to raise the floor. And then we say raise the ceiling. If you go to a great school, you have great teachers, et cetera, it allows that teacher to then up level. But the simple answer is we've always viewed ourselves as you can be used in a pretty lightweight way, just as a supplement every now and then. But if you want to go all in and use it as your core, use it as your main tool, you actually can. And then the first part was the...
will it be used, do you see it fully teaching online courses?
Fully teach everything. Things are changing so fast. I'll say first, I don't think it's ever going to be able to... I think there will always be huge value for having a human being with you, having your peers, having your teacher there, et cetera. That's going to be very invaluable. I think teaching is one of the safest jobs in this transformation. With that said, I think you're going to see it be used in... We've already talked, it can be like a teaching assistant, can help grade, write progress reports. the tutoring aspect's going to get richer and richer and richer. I mean, we're realizing that a lot of the power of a tutor isn't just answering your questions Socratically, remembering, you should have a connection with it. It's also calling up your mom and saying, hey, so-and-so needs help. You need to like do this, or he's not studying enough, or whatever. We're going to be doing things like that. But you know, by the time you're starting to think GPT-6 or GPT-7, what might be possible, I really don't know. I don't think it's going to replace, but I think you're going to be able to. We're already working on it so you can talk to it conversationally, but I think you're going to be able to Zoom with it. I think you're going to be able to text with it wherever you want. You might have sensors in a classroom where it's able to, you know, see emotions and things like that. We're already starting pilots where it's running breakout sessions with students. We have this other platform, Schoolhouse.world, which is for free tutoring. We're already using it to give our tutors feedback on how they can tutor better. We're looking at ways where, while they're tutoring, it's essentially whispering in their ear, saying, hey, you haven't called on that student in a while, or here's an example you might want to use, or things like that.
Thank you. Next question, and we briefly touched on this earlier as well. What do you think, how is Khanmigo and Gen AI in general impacting the critical thinking and knowledge of the next generation that are growing up using more and more of these assistants?
I think someone who wants to check out and not learn, they've always had options. When we were kids, you have Cliff Notes and this and that, and obviously for the last 20 years, you've had the internet. And if you look for a synopsis of Romeo and Juliet or anything, you can find it if you really want to not try to do the work.
Yeah, at our age, we would go to the library looking for it.
Exactly. And that was more. Yeah. I think, to my answer about, I actually think, and I don't want to be overly optimistic, but I actually think Gen AI can actually solve a lot of these issues that we've been facing since all of us were kids. As I said, imagine a teacher assigns not a Khan Academy. Let's say there's an article in the New York Times that the teacher wants all the students to read. Today, or when we were kids, the teacher says, here's a link, read it. They don't know who read it. Yeah. Kids fake it. They ask their friends, hey, what does it say, etc. Within the year, you're going to go to the article, the link and Khanmigo is going to sit there right there and say, hey, can I help you understand any of this? You're like, oh, I'm good. Maybe you can. It'll highlight. Okay, and it's like, okay, well, the teacher wanted me to review, make sure you understood that. So highlights this portion. Can you explain why the author wrote this? Or do you agree with this part? And then it'll report back to the teacher. It's like, yeah, I'm pretty sure that she read it. And this is the transcript. So I think that type of thing actually will promote critical thinking. This Socratic dialogue will promote critical thinking more than undermine it. But we'll see.
We have a few questions around how do you see formal education changing and learning models change, specifically traditional degrees and institutions with the advent of AI?
Yeah, I think AI might be a little bit of an accelerant, but I would have given the same answer last year, which is, as Malika and I'm a big fan of competency-based learning versus seat time. Mm-hmm. Most of the system globally is how long did you sit in a chair, and you have a variable outcome of how well you know it. The reality should be, do you know the algebra or not? Did it take you, that doesn't matter if it took you 2 weeks to learn it or 2 years to learn it, do you know the algebra or not? Do you understand the history, et cetera? AI will allow us to do that with more richer types of things. We are looking at how it could be used for assessment, richer assessments than just traditional multiple choice, et cetera. So it'll accelerate that you can get bigger signals and measure it through competency, not just seat time.
But Sal, is this like then maybe also tying into your mastery-based system that Khan Lab School was part of? It looks like that is what is
right. Mastery-based learning is just the idea that if a student hasn't learned it well yet, that they should always have the opportunity, the incentive to keep working on it, to fill in that gap.
But this is going to help.
This will help, and you can do it with more things. With multiple choice math questions or numeric, it was easy. Khan Academy, you just keep working. We keep giving you new questions until you've kind of got it. With writing, it's kind of hard, because someone's grading that paper, doing another revision, and grading it. I mean, at Khan Lab School, it's very labor intensive. But if you can do that fast cycle with the AI, then you can do mastery learning with writing. You can do mastery learning with debate. You can do mastery learning with a much larger set of. I think assessment of the future, it's going to be, think about the best assessments. If you're doing a PhD oral defense, you're having that type of thing, a job interview. Those are very rich, but they're also incredibly inconsistent and incredibly biased. I think you're going to a world where you can get that richness by literally having a conversation, but then you can ensure that I will never say it's unbiased, but it's less biased than the status quo, which is, I think, the bar that you should have because you can test it with a lot of different potential candidates.
Next question. This is the highest voted question. We did briefly touch on this already, but do you think students' reliance on ChatGPT will make them less intelligent and competent?
I mean, the student who does will become less, and I think they will work for the kids who are doing the work themselves. As I said,
Historically, it's always been like that.
Well, and the reality is, when ChatGPT is already operating at the 80th percentile for the LSAT, or can already write code as well as maybe 60% of software engineers or whatever, you want to be in the position to harness that. So if you're going to go from software engineer to software architect and put the pieces together, you should understand the code as well as your junior software engineers. If you want to elevate from writer to editor, a great editor understands what great writing is like. They understand how to give feedback. Yeah. If you can't do that, the AI revolution, you're going to be a victim of it, and you're not going to have agency in it.
Is Khan Academy currently creating content/courses in the adult continued learning space, and how will Khan Amigo also play a part in that space?
So even before Khan Amigo, we were doing things like financial literacy, civics, which you could argue is K-12, but it's also, I think Khan Amigo has definitely broadened the scope of what we might do. We've had some corporations, we're having debates internally of like, is this too out of scope? But a lot of corporate learning, they're coming, it's like, hey, can Khan Amigo work on our corporate intranet? We're like, maybe, like let's talk about it. But the content that used to be
very limited.
Limited. It would take us $1 million or so to create each course, and it would take a few $100,000 every year to maintain those courses. But as the AI isn't good enough yet, where you can just generate content and say, this is great content. There has to be humans in the loop.
At least it's still giving you
It's improving productivity dramatically for our content creation teams. But by the time you get to GPT-6 or GPT-7, we don't know what's going to be possible.
Well, we are only 9 or 8 seconds left into our session. So do we want to take on a last question?
Is the next step on your roadmap for Khan Amigo to improve teaching or learning?
It's both. And I think this is, we've built it as a tutor for every student, a teaching assistant for every teacher. And that latter piece, I actually think is maybe what I'm most excited about, because every ed tech, including us, before this, the pitch to teachers and educators was, hey, we have this tool, look at all these efficacy studies. If you just use it this way, your kids will grow 30% faster, your test scores will improve. And the teachers love it. They say, this is great. But at the end of the day, they're overworked, they have a lot to do, and this is one more thing for them to do. But this is the first time where we can go to them with a straight face and say, by the way, right now you're spending 10, 15 hours a week grading papers, writing progress reports, writing lesson plans. We can turn that into 1 hour a week. Take that time for yourself or spend more time with the students. So I think teachers are naturally going to pull this because it makes their life easier, and then that will make it easier for them to use it with their students.
So they're getting more relaxed, so they can actually focus on teaching the kids rather than getting stressed out with 20 kids in their
100%. I'll just finish on this one thing. Even at Khan Academy, when we've had other people, whether you're writing code, writing articles, making videos, questions, I've always told our team, if you're not enjoying doing it, the person who is receiving the output of what you're doing is not going to enjoy it either. And I think the same thing is true of teaching. So if we can de-stress the teacher, kids can feel that stress. They can feel what what burnout feels like, and everyone then gets stressed. If everyone gets a little bit more breathing room, I think classrooms are going to be a lot more fun.
Well, Sal, I think this conversation can go endlessly, but thank you so much for being here. I know we all were very excited to hear about this. To be very honest, as a mom, I actually feel very comfortable with the answers I've just received today because, it's been on all our minds. But it seems like it's more of a tool to support us rather than being afraid. It's like the entrepreneurship where you take the plunge knowing that things will go bad, but most of the things will go right.
And I'll say it's not a flip of the coin. We can't just sit and wait, is this going to be good or bad? More good people have to use it, and it will be good.
That's true. That's how it works.
If we just wait for the bad people, then it will be bad. Yes.
But thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you.